All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Raiders Daily Training Camp. The first week of training camp is officially over. The Las Vegas Raiders, there's some good things, there's some bad things. We're going to talk about it all in today's video. But one of the things that's really stood out to me, now Jimmy G got a rest day today on Friday, so he only saw 2 days of practices. One thing I really have noticed is just the vibe. The vibe seems a lot looser, a lot freer. These guys seem to have a mentality where it's like the expectations are low. Nobody's really talking about us. Nobody really cares about us. If they are talking about us, it's negatively. That's all just outside noise. We don't care about that. We're going to leave that at the door. We're going to let our play speak for itself. And until that happens, we're just going to get to work. This is a team that is very hungry, and I think they have a chip on their shoulder, specifically that defense. I think it's young. And I think it's very, very hungry, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people this upcoming season. Before we get into tonight's video, if you guys enjoy it, be sure to hit the like button, hit that sub button for daily Raiders content. We're trying to hit 10,000 subs by the start of the regular season, so let's try and get 250 likes on tonight's video. Now, Jimmy G's leadership as a whole, to me, is I just love it. Everybody loves Jimmy Garoppolo, okay? His teammates, his coaches, his former teammates, his former coaches, everybody across the league likes Jimmy G. And, I really don't want to make this comparison to Derek Carr, because Derek Carr is a great quarterback. And I loved his leadership as well. Jimmy G is not Derek Carr. They're different people. They're different leaders. They're going to lead differently. So I don't want this to be sounded like a comparison, like in a negative comparison, but I just really like the switch that Jimmy G has pretty much not emulated, but the aura, right? Chandler Jones speaking so highly of him, coaches speaking so highly of him, Davante Adams speaking so highly of him. There's already this chemistry with Jimmy and the whole roster. And that's something that you love to see because the quarterback clearly is the leader of your team. He's the leader of your team. And Jimmy G is a guy that I want as my leader, right? So, like I said, rest day today, but apparently the Raiders practice today with Aiden as the QB1 getting the starting reps with Brian Hoyer. Aiden O'Connell, 4th round draft pick, the rookie. Apparently it was just not as good of a smooth practice, right? It just wasn't smooth today. There were a lot of hiccups, a lot of miscues, some miscommunications, some bad timing, and yeah, that's to be expected, man. It's the first week of training camp. We kind of ranted yesterday about why the NFL scheduling with training camp and just the offseason in general, I think, is very wacky. And I know a lot of coaches this year specifically have said something about it. You see so many injuries this week. So just kind of, say a prayer because this was, the Raiders are healthy, right? We're healthy. I know there are some guys dealing with injuries, but no big, oh shit moment. So that's good. Zamir White, a lot of hype coming around with Zamir White. Apparently he's bulky. He's big. The guy lived in the weight room this past summer, it appears. The Zamir White hype has died down. This time last year, I was huge on Zamir White. I remember watching him at Georgia. Coming out of high school, this was a guy who was a 5-star athlete. Highly recruited, obviously went to Georgia, was the starting running back. So, very talented player. But I thought he was always kind of underrated, right? And in his final season at Georgia, 160 rushes, 856 yards. He had 5.4 yards per carry and 11 touchdowns. In fact, in his last 2 years at Georgia, he was there for 3 seasons. In his last 2 years as the starting running back at Georgia, 5.4 yards per carry and 11 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. We all are fully aware of the Josh Jacobs holdout by now. It is not news. And to be quite honest with you, it's beginning to be frustrated. And it's tough as a fan because I want Josh Jacobs as a player to be paid, right? I want him to be paid because he's an athlete. He's a great athlete. He was great last season. He's had a good NFL career. I want him to get paid. But then I also understand, from the NFL standpoint, if you're the GM, paying these big bucks to these running backs usually doesn't work out, right? I would say actually just usually doesn't work out. We've seen big time contract extensions. Guys either just get injured or since they're running backs and they're just taking beatings every single day for years on end, they just kind of regress, right? We've seen it. We saw it with Le'Veon Bell, the holdout. He said he always regrets sitting out that season for Pittsburgh. We've seen it time and time again, right? Todd Gurley, right? So Zamir White, to me, is going to have a much bigger role on the Raiders this upcoming season because they did not use him at all last year. And you didn't need to use him at all last year because Josh Jacobs was the leading rusher in the National Football League. But Zamir White, especially in red zone opportunities, look out for him this next season. Another guy, just kind of the overall theme with a lot of these Raiders players, chips on shoulders. These guys are hungry, man. They want it. So I love to see it because it was very surprising to me that the Raiders did not take a running back this year because, it was still Josh Jacobs. What's the future of Josh Jacobs? What's the future of Josh Jacobs on the Raiders? Zamir White saw like 17 rushing attempts last year. So, is this post Josh Jacobs' life? Did they have a replacement ready? Are they going to go through this year, see what they have with Zamir? The Josh plays and you have Zamir, and if Zamir's the guy, you go with him. If not, you draft a running back. That's probably the thought process with them. So I like to see that they believe in Zamir White. So defensively, they've looked good. All right, just to simply put, apparently they've looked really good. And typically you see that, that's why we try and always say, try and keep an even keel, in training camps in general, in preseason, just the NFL offseason in general, because there's a lot of storylines. People are trying to get clicks. There's some fake narratives going around, all this stuff. But usually, like defensively, it's an easier base scheme to understand as opposed to the offense. There's a lot of moving parts on the offensive side. So typically your defense is just usually going to be better. They're just usually going to look better, less mistakes to start off training camp. So that's what we saw this past week. But it is great news to hear regardless, because the Raiders defense struggled last season. But, as time goes on, I think a lot Raiders fans are starting to come around to that defense. A lot of them. Right, there are some dogs on this team. Marcus Peters coming on over this past week to the Raiders. That was a big-time move. You still have Max Crosby. You had a great draft pick in Tyree Wilson. You still have Chandler Jones, hoping to get as much as you possibly can out of him. You got Bilal in the defensive tackle. You got Double D, rising star linebacker in this league. You got Nate Hobbs, kind of a rising defensive back in this league. It's just an unproven roster or unproven defense, but there's talent. There's talent all over it. So I really think this Raiders team is going to turn some heads because, I know Jimmy G is a good quarterback, and I know the Raiders offensively have everything I need. They've got the offensive line. They got the run game. They've got the receiving core, receiving threats. They have the quarterback. I have no worries with the offense. Defensively, that's where the concerns come in. I really think this team, defense is going to shock some people this upcoming season. It's going to be a huge step in the right direction. So that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button. We're going to continue covering training camp and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned for more. Peace.